I've always been good at surviving. Not the kind of surviving that gets you medals or headlines, but the quiet, stubborn kind that keeps you moving when the world feels like it's caving in. My name is Elena Harper, and at 32, I've learned that life doesn't hand out maps. You just keep walking, even when the path is dark and the ground feels like it's crumbling beneath your feet. I grew up in a small town on the outskirts of Charleston, South Carolina, in a house that creaked like it was telling ghost stories. My mother died when I was 6, leaving me with a father who loved me but didn't know how to show it. He was a fisherman, gone before dawn, back after dusk, smelling of salt and regret. The local foster system became my second home after he drank himself into a hospital bed when I was 12. I bounced between homes, each one a little colder than the last, until I turned 18 and clawed my way out with a scholarship to the University of South Carolina. I studied architecture, not because I love buildings, but because I wanted to build something permanent, something no one could take away. That's where I met Julian Caldwell. He was everything I wasn't: polished, ambitious, a tech prodigy who could code symphonies while I was sketching blueprints for homes I'd never live in. We met at a campus coffee shop, where I was nursing a lukewarm latte, and he was arguing with a friend about neural networks. His voice, sharp and confident, cut through the hum of the room. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but when he caught me staring, he grinned, a slow, disarming smile that made my chest tighten. "You look like you've got an opinion on this," he said, leaning across the table. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray and unpredictable. "I don't even know what you're talking about," I admitted, pushing my sketchbook aside. "But you sound like you're trying to convince the world it's flat." He laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that made you feel like you'd won something. "Fair enough. I'm Julian, and you are—" "Elena," I said, and that was the beginning. We were opposites in every way. He was all logic and ambition, dreaming of Silicon Valley and billion-dollar startups. I was the girl who drew houses in the margins of her notes, who believed home was more than walls and a roof. But when we talked, it was like weaving a tapestry, his threads of code and my dreams of structure blending into something neither of us could have predicted. We'd walk along the Congaree River, arguing about whether Frank Lloyd Wright was overrated or if AI could ever understand art. He'd tease me about my thrift store sweaters, and I'd call him out for wearing sneakers that cost more than my rent. One night, under a sky heavy with stars, he kissed me. It was in a park near campus, the air thick with jasmine and the hum of cicadas. His lips were tentative at first, like he was afraid I'd vanish. I kissed him back, and it felt like laying the foundation for something real. "Your trouble, Elena Harper," he whispered, his breath warm against my cheek. "And I'm all in." We were married a year later, in a small ceremony at a historic chapel in Charleston. My foster sister, Mara, was my maid of honor, her wild curls barely tamed by a ribbon. Julian's parents, stiff and proper, sat in the front row, looking like they'd wandered into the wrong story. I wore a second-hand dress I'd altered myself, the lace soft against my skin. Julian looked at me like I was the only thing in the world worth building. We danced under string lights to a local band playing folk tunes, and I thought, this is it. This is home. But home, I learned, is a fragile thing. Julian got an offer from a tech firm in San Francisco, and I followed, leaving behind my dreams of a small architecture firm in Charleston. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd find my place in his world of glass towers and venture capital. But San Francisco was cold in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. Julian's days grew longer, his nights consumed by code and conference calls. I took freelance drafting jobs, sketching houses for clients I'd never meet, while our apartment filled with silence. I tried to bridge the gap. I'd leave notes on his desk, cook dinners he'd eat cold at midnight, suggest weekend trips to the Redwoods. But he was always chasing the next milestone, a new algorithm, a funding round, a headline in TechCrunch. When I told him I was pregnant, I thought it would pull us back together. I stood in our sterile kitchen, holding a grainy ultrasound photo, my voice trembling with hope. "Julian, we're going to have a baby." He froze, his coffee mug halfway to his lips. "A baby," he repeated, like the word was a glitch in his code. "Elena, I don't know if I'm ready for this." I laughed, nervous, thinking he was joking. "Ready? Nobody's ready. We'll figure it out together." But he didn't laugh. His eyes, those storm cloud eyes, were distant. My company's at a critical point. I can't do this right now. The words hit like a wrecking ball. I waited for him to take them back, to wrap his arms around me and say he'd be there. Instead, he left for a meeting, promising we'd talk later. Later never came. Days turned into weeks, and his distance grew colder. He'd respond to my texts with single words. Avoid my calls. Stay late at the office. I sent him a tiny pair of shoes, hoping they'd spark something. He sent back a thumbs-up emoji. One night, I woke to find him packing a bag. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice raw from crying. "I can't be the man you need, Elena," he said, not meeting my eyes. "I'm not built for this. Marriage, kids, any of it. I'm sorry." "You're sorry." I stepped toward him, my hands shaking. "We made vows, Julian. I left everything for you." "I know," he whispered, "and I'm failing you. It's better if I go now, before I ruin everything." He left that night, the door closing with a soft click that echoed in my bones. I stood in our half-empty apartment, my hand on my belly, feeling the first flutter of life inside me. I was alone, but I wasn't empty. I had something to build, even if it was just for me and the child I carried. 3 weeks later, at a routine ultrasound, the technician's face went still. "Miss Harper," she said, her voice gentle, "you're not having one baby. You're having twins." I stared at the screen, 2 tiny heartbeats pulsing like stars. "Twins," I whispered, my voice breaking. Fear and wonder crashed together, a tidal wave I couldn't outrun. I was 24, alone, with no family to lean on and a husband who'd walked away. But as I watched those heartbeats, I made a promise. I will be enough for you. Both of you. I moved back to Charleston, to a small apartment above a bakery that smelled of cinnamon and yeast. Mara, my foster sister, became my lifeline. She'd show up with grocery bags, bad jokes, and a fierce loyalty that kept me from drowning. "You're a badass, Elena," she'd say, tossing me a pint of ice cream. "You're building a whole damn universe for those kids." The twins, Ezra and Lila, were born on a rainy April morning. Ezra came first, his cry sharp and demanding, like he was announcing his arrival to the world. Lila followed, quieter, her tiny hand curling around my finger like she already trusted me. I held them, tears streaming down my face, and felt a love so fierce it scared me. They were my home, my purpose, my everything. The first year was a blur of sleepless nights and endless diapers. I took freelance work, sketching blueprints between feedings, my laptop balanced on a pile of burp cloths. Mara would babysit when I had deadlines, singing off-key lullabies that made the twins giggle. I didn't have time to grieve Julian, but his absence was a shadow, always there, darkening the edges of my joy. When the twins were 2, I landed a job at a local architecture firm. It wasn't glamorous, mostly drafting plans for suburban homes, but it paid the bills. I'd drop Ezra and Lila at daycare, work 10-hour days, then come home to read them stories and kiss their sticky cheeks. Every milestone, first steps, first words, first scraped knees, felt like a victory. I was building something, not just for them, but for me. But the loneliness lingered. At night, when the twins were asleep, I'd sit on my tiny balcony, staring at the Charleston skyline, wondering if Julian ever thought of us. I didn't hate him, not anymore. Hate was too heavy to carry. But I couldn't forget the man who'd promised me forever, then left me to build it alone. One evening, when the twins were 4, Mara dragged me to a bar. "You need to live a little, Elena," she said, shoving a glass of wine into my hand. "You're a mom, not a monk." I laughed, sipping the wine, feeling the warmth loosen the knot in my chest. The bar was crowded, the air thick with music and laughter. I hadn't felt this light in years. One glass turned into 2, then 3, and soon I was dancing, my body remembering how to move. Mara cheered me on, her grin infectious. That's when I saw him, not Julian, but a stranger with dark hair and a smile that felt like a spark. He introduced himself as Nate, a lawyer with a quick wit and a laugh that made my skin hum. We talked until last call, about everything and nothing. Charleston's historic streets, my love for old houses, his obsession with jazz. When he asked for my number, I hesitated, then scribbled it on a napkin. "Don't make me regret this," I teased. He didn't. We went on a few dates, slow and cautious. Nate was kind, steady, the opposite of Julian's restless ambition. But every time he reached for my hand, I'd feel a pang of guilt, like I was betraying the life I'd planned with someone else. I told myself it was time to move on, but my heart wasn't convinced. A month later, I woke up in a hotel room that wasn't mine. The sheets smelled of cedar and musk, and my head pounded from too much wine. I turned, my heart stopping as I saw Nate beside me, his face soft in sleep. Panic clawed at me. What had I done? I'd never been reckless, not since Julian. I gathered my clothes, my hands shaking, and slipped out before he woke, the memory of his touch burning in my mind. Back home, I threw myself into routine, pretending nothing had happened. Mara noticed, of course. "Spill," she said, cornering me in the kitchen. "You've got that deer-in-headlights look." I told her everything, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what I was thinking, Mara. I'm not this person." She hugged me, her voice gentle. "You're human, Elena. You're allowed to mess up." But the mess wasn't over. 6 weeks later, I stared at a pregnancy test, the 2 lines glaring back at me. I was pregnant again. Alone again. The weight of it crushed me, but beneath the fear, there was a flicker of determination. I'd done this before. I could do it again. I didn't tell Nate. I couldn't. He'd been kind, but this wasn't his burden. I went back to building, one day at a time, for Ezra, Lila, and the new life growing inside me. Mara was there as always, with ice cream and fierce love. "You're a damn warrior," she said, and I believed her, even when I didn't feel it. The twins were my anchor, their laughter my lifeline. But as my belly grew, I couldn't shake the feeling that my past was still out there, waiting to collide with my present. Julian's shadow lingered, and now Nate's did too. I didn't know how to weave them into my tapestry, but I knew I'd keep going. For my children. For me. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and hope, a strange mix that clung to the walls like damp air. I lay in the bed, my body aching but my heart full, staring at the tiny bundle in my arms. Ivy. My daughter. Her eyes, still adjusting to the world, were a soft hazel, like the marshes at dawn. She was 6 pounds, 3 ounces, born on an October morning when the Charleston sky was a watercolor of orange and pink. The twins, Ezra and Lila, were at Mara's, probably eating too many pancakes and demanding to know when they could meet their sister. I told them soon, but the truth was I wasn't ready. Not for their questions, not for the weight of being enough for 3. Ivy's tiny fingers curled around mine, and I felt that same fierce love I'd felt with the twins, but this time it was laced with fear. Ezra and Lila had been a surprise, but I'd had Julian then, at least in theory. Now it was just me, 32, with a creaky apartment, a freelance-heavy job at an architecture firm, and a past that kept sneaking up like a shadow. Nate's face flashed in my mind, his dark hair, his warm laugh, the way he'd looked at me that night at the hotel. I hadn't seen him since I slipped out of his room, my heart pounding with regret. I couldn't tell him about Ivy. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The nurse, a woman with kind eyes and a low-country drawl, checked my chart. "You're doing great, sugar," she said. "You want me to call anyone?" "Family." I shook my head, forcing a smile. "My sister's got my kids. I'm good." She nodded, but her eyes lingered, like she could see the cracks I was trying to hide. "All right, then. You rest. That little girl's gonna need you strong." I looked at Ivy, her breath soft and steady, and whispered, "We're gonna be okay, you and me." But the words felt like a prayer I wasn't sure would be answered. Mara brought the twins to meet Ivy 2 days later when I was back in my apartment above the bakery. The smell of cinnamon rolls drifted up through the floorboards, mixing with the chaos of our tiny home. Ezra burst in first, his 6-year-old energy like a hurricane, his dark curls bouncing. "Where's the baby?" he demanded, climbing onto the couch. "Shoo! Ezra, she's sleeping," I said, pointing to the bassinet by my chair. Lila, quieter but just as curious, peeked over the edge, her eyes wide. "She's so small," Lila whispered, her voice full of awe. "Like a doll." "She's not a doll," Ezra said, rolling his eyes. "She's a human, Lila." I laughed, the sound surprising me. "You're both right. She's small, and she's human. And she's your sister." Mara set a bag of groceries on the counter, her wild curls tied back with a scarf. "You're a damn superhero, Elena," she said, unpacking diapers and formula. "3 kids. I can barely handle my cat." "You're handling us just fine," I said, pulling her into a hug. Mara wasn't my sister by blood, but foster care had made us family. She'd been there through every crisis, Julian leaving, the twins' birth, and now this. I didn't know how to repay her, but I knew she'd never ask. The twins crowded around Ivy, their questions tumbling over each other. "Can she play yet? Why is she so wrinkly? Does she like dinosaurs?" I answered as best I could, my heart swelling at their excitement. But when they were asleep, the apartment quiet except for Ivy's soft breaths, the weight of it all settled in. 3 kids, a job that barely paid the bills, a heart still bruised from one man and tangled up over another. The first few months were a blur of feedings, diapers, and deadlines. My job at the architecture firm was picking up with a new project designing a row of historic-style townhouses for a developer. It was my first big break, a chance to move beyond drafting to actual design. But it meant long hours, sketching late into the night while Ivy napped and the twins watched cartoons. I dropped them at daycare, rushed to the office, then picked them up, my arms full of backpacks and sippy cups. I was exhausted, but I couldn't stop. My kids deserved a life better than the one I'd had, bouncing between foster homes with nothing to call my own. Money was tight. The twins needed new shoes. Lila was starting soccer, and Ivy's formula wasn't cheap. I'd lie awake at night, running numbers in my head, wondering how I'd make it work. Then, one morning, I found an envelope slipped under my door. No name, no note, just $500 in cash. I stared at it, my hands shaking. Was it a mistake? Charity? I tucked it away, too proud to use it but too desperate to throw it out. A week later, a package arrived, diapers, wipes, and a soft blanket embroidered with Ivy's name. Then another, with a gift card to a grocery store. Each time, there was no sender, no explanation. I asked Mara if she told anyone about my situation, but she swore she hadn't. "Maybe you've got a guardian angel," she said, winking. But I wasn't so sure. Angels didn't leave cash in diapers. People did, and people always wanted something in return. I started paying closer attention, checking my mailbox, watching for strangers outside the bakery. Once, I thought I saw a man in a dark coat lingering across the street, but when I stepped outside, he was gone. My mind went to Julian, his tech empire now splashed across headlines. Could he know about the twins? About Ivy? But he'd made it clear he didn't want this life. Still, the thought gnawed at me, a thread I couldn't pull without unraveling everything. Spring came, painting Charleston in blooms and soft light. The twins were 6 now, full of questions and energy, while Ivy at 6 months was starting to babble and grab at everything. I took them to the Saturday market on Marion Square, a rare day off where we could just be. Ezra ran ahead, eyeing a stall with wooden toys, while Lila clung to my hand, pointing at a woman selling bright scarves. Ivy was in her stroller, chewing on a teething ring, her hazel eyes taking in the world. "Mom, can we get lemonade?" Ezra called, already halfway to a vendor. "Slow down, buddy," I said, laughing. "Wait for us." I was digging in my bag for cash when I heard a voice behind me. "Elena!" I froze. That voice, warm, familiar, like a song I hadn't heard in years. I turned, and there he was, Nate. His dark hair was a little longer, his brown eyes still carrying that spark that had drawn me in at the bar. He wore a navy jacket, his hands in his pockets, a hesitant smile on his face. "Nate," I said, my voice barely steady. "Hi." He glanced at the twins, then at Ivy, his smile faltering. "Wow, you've got a full crew." "Yeah," I said, forcing a laugh. "This is Ezra, Lila, and Ivy." He crouched to their level, his grin easy. "Hey, Ezra, Lila. I'm Nate. You guys like the market?" Ezra nodded, eyeing him suspiciously. "You know my mom?" "We're friends," Nate said, glancing at me. "Right, Elena?" I nodded, my throat tight. Friends. That word didn't cover the night we'd spent together, the morning I'd run from, or the secret I was carrying now. Ivy was his, and he didn't know. The guilt hit me like a wave, but I pushed it down. "Not here. Not now. You want to join us?" I asked, surprising myself. We're just wandering. He hesitated, then nodded. Sure, I'd like that. We walked through the market, the twins chattering about everything from seagulls to cotton candy. Nate was good with them, asking Ezra about dinosaurs and Lila about her favorite color, purple, always purple. He pushed Ivy's stroller, making silly faces that got her giggling. It was easy, too easy, and that scared me. I kept waiting for him to ask about Ivy, to notice her eyes were the same shade as his, but he didn't. He just talked about his job, a pro bono case he was working on for a local nonprofit, and how he'd missed Charleston's charm when he'd been away. You seem happy, he said at one point, his voice soft. Tired, but happy. I shrugged, adjusting Lila's ponytail. It's a lot, but they're worth it. He nodded, his eyes lingering on Ivy. She's beautiful. How old is she? 6 months, I said, my heart pounding. I waited for the follow-up, the math, but he just smiled. She's got your spirit, he said. I can tell. We parted ways at the edge of the market, the twins tugging me toward a face-painting booth. Nate scribbled his number on a receipt, pressing it into my hand. Call me Elena, if you want. No pressure. I nodded, tucking the receipt into my pocket. Thanks, Nate. As he walked away, I felt the weight of that receipt like a stone. I wanted to call him, to tell him everything, but fear held me back. What if he wanted more than I could give? What if he didn't want anything at all? That night, after the kids were asleep, I found another package on my doorstep. This time, it was a laptop, a sleek, expensive model I'd never have bought myself. A note was taped to the box, typed and signed, for your designs. Keep building. My hands trembled as I opened it, the screen lighting up with a welcome message. It was exactly what I needed for my townhouse project, but the mystery of it unnerved me. Someone was watching, someone who knew my life, my work, my kids. I called Mara, my voice shaking. This is getting weird, I said, explaining the laptop. Who's doing this? And why? Maybe it's someone who sees what I see, she said. A woman who doesn't quit, no matter what. Let it be a gift, Elena. You deserve it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that gifts came with strings. I sat on my balcony, the Charleston skyline glowing softly, and thought about Nate. His smile, his kindness, the way he'd looked at Ivy. I thought about Julian, too, his absence a wound that hadn't fully healed. The laptop sat on my table, a symbol of help I didn't understand, and I wondered if I was strong enough to keep building alone, or if I'd have to let someone in. Mara came over the next day, her arms full of takeout. You're overthinking this, she said, setting out fried chicken and collards. Nate seems like a good guy. And the mystery donor? Maybe it's just someone who wants to help. Not everyone's got an agenda. I don't know how to trust that, I admitted, picking at my food. After Julian. Julian's not here, she said, her voice firm. You are. And you're doing this. 3 kids, a career, all of it. But you don't have to do it alone. Call Nate. Or don't. But don't let fear make the choice for you. I looked at Ivy, asleep in her crib, and the twins, sprawled on the couch with crayons. They were my world, my reason. But Mara was right. I was human, and humans needed more than just survival. I pulled Nate's number from my pocket, my thumb hovering over the call button. Not yet, but maybe soon. For now, I'd keep building, one brick at a time, hoping the foundation would hold. The Charleston summer was relentless, the air thick with humidity and the buzz of cicadas. My apartment above the bakery felt like a sauna, even with the fans whirring. Ezra and Lila, now 6, were sprawled on the living room floor, arguing over a puzzle while Ivy, 2 years old, banged a plastic spoon against her high chair, her hazel eyes sparkling with mischief. I was at the kitchen table, my laptop open to a half-finished blueprint for the townhouse project, but my mind was elsewhere. The anonymous donations hadn't stopped. Another envelope of cash last week, a set of art supplies for the twins, even a new stroller for Ivy. Each one came with no name, no note, just that typed message. Keep building. I'd spent months trying to solve the mystery. I'd asked the bakery owner downstairs, checked with the mail carrier, even called the company that made the laptop. Nothing. My gut kept circling back to Julian. He was a tech billionaire now, his name plastered across articles about AI breakthroughs and startup acquisitions. If anyone had the resources to pull this off without a trace, it was him. But why? He'd walked away 8 years ago, leaving me pregnant with the twins and a heart full of cracks. Why would he care now? I pulled up my laptop and typed his name into a search engine. The results were overwhelming. Profiles in Forbes, interviews on tech podcasts, a sleek website for his company, Caldwell Innovations. Then I saw it, a headline about a tech conference in Charleston happening this weekend at the Gallard Center. Julian was the keynote speaker. My stomach twisted. He was here in my city, just miles away. I could ignore it, keep my head down, keep building my life without him. Or I could face him, demand answers about the donations, and finally close the door on our past. Mom, Lila's hogging the puzzle. Ezra's voice snapped me back. I'm not hogging. Lila shot back, her ponytail bouncing. You're just slow. Guys, share, I said, rubbing my temples. Or the puzzle goes in timeout. They grumbled but settled down, and I looked at Ivy, who was now smearing applesauce on her tray. You're the easy one today, kiddo, I said, kissing her forehead. But my mind was already racing, planning. I needed to see Julian. Not for me, but for the truth. Mara agreed to watch the kids Saturday night. She showed up with a pizza and a knowing look. You're doing that thing where you look calm but you're freaking out inside, she said, tossing her scarf on the couch. What's up? I told her about the conference, about Julian. Her eyes narrowed. You sure you want to poke that bear? He hurt you, Elena. Bad. I know, I said, packing Ivy's diaper bag for the night. But if he's the one sending this stuff, I need to know why. And if he's not, I need to know that too. She sighed, pulling me into a hug. You're braver than me. Just don't let him mess with your head again. I nodded, but as I drove to the Gallard Center, my hands trembled on the wheel. The venue was all glass and elegance, lit up against the evening sky. Inside, it was a sea of suits and tech jargon, people clutching wine glasses and business cards. I felt out of place in my simple black dress, my hair pulled back in a messy bun, but I squared my shoulders and scanned the crowd. I'd spent years building a life without Julian. I could handle one conversation. He was on stage when I found him, his voice smooth and commanding as he talked about AI's future. He looked different, older, sharper, his dark hair flecked with gray, his storm-cloud eyes still piercing. But he was still Julian, the man who'd kissed me under a starry sky and promised me forever. I stood at the back of the auditorium, my heart pounding, until his talk ended and the crowd surged toward him. I waited until the admirers thinned out, then approached. He was signing a program for a young woman when he saw me. His pen froze, his eyes widening. Elena! Hi, Julian, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. We need to talk. He nodded, handing the program back and gesturing to a quiet corner. I didn't expect to see you here, he said, his voice low. You look good. Don't, I said, crossing my arms. I'm not here for compliments. I need to know if you're the one sending me money, supplies, a damn laptop, anonymous gifts, Julian. Sound familiar? His brows furrowed, genuine confusion in his eyes. What are you talking about? I haven't sent you anything. I studied him, searching for a lie, but all I saw was shock. Then why are you here in Charleston? After all this time? The conference, he said, running a hand through his hair. It's a big deal for my company. I didn't know you were still here, Elena. I thought you'd moved on. Moved on. My voice rose, drawing a few glances. I lowered it, stepping closer. You left me, Julian. You walked out when I was pregnant. You don't get to talk about moving on. His face paled. Pregnant. I froze, the air sucked out of the room. You didn't know. He shook his head, his eyes searching mine. You never told me. I thought you just needed space. I was drowning in work, Elena. I wasn't ready for what? A family. I snapped, my voice trembling. You made that clear when you packed your bag and left. But I had twins, Julian, Ezra and Lila. They're 6 now, and I've been doing this alone. He staggered back, like I'd hit him. Twins, he whispered. I have kids. The word hung between us, heavy and raw. I wanted to scream, to cry, to shake him for not knowing, for not being there. But the pain in his eyes stopped me. It wasn't an act. He hadn't known. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, his voice breaking. I tried. I said, tears burning my eyes. I called. I texted. I sent you those damn baby shoes. You didn't answer. You were gone. He looked away, his jaw tight. I was a coward. I thought I was doing you a favor letting you go. I didn't know, Elena. I swear. I wanted to believe him, but the hurt was too deep, layered over years of sleepless nights and scraped-together meals. And the donations? The cash, the supplies? If it's not you, who is it? I don't know, he said, his voice earnest. But I'll help you find out. I owe you that. You owe me nothing, I said, stepping back. I've built a life without you. My kids are happy. I'm fine. Are you? He asked, his eyes searching mine. Because you don't look fine. You look like you're carrying the world. I turned away, my throat tight. I have to go. My kids need me. Elena, he called, but I was already walking, the crowd swallowing me up. I made it to my car before the tears came, hot and unstoppable. I'd wanted answers, but all I'd found was more pain and a flicker of something else, something I didn't want to name. Back home, Mara was waiting, the kids asleep. Ivy was curled in her crib. Ezra and Lila tangled in blankets on the couch. How'd it go? Mara asked, handing me a glass of wine. He didn't know about the twins, I said, sinking onto a chair. And he says he's not the one sending the gifts. She raised an eyebrow. You believe him? I don't know, I admitted. He looked broken. Like he actually cared. Mara snorted. Caring now doesn't erase 7 years, Selena. Be careful. I know, I said, staring at the wine. But he's their father. What if he wants to be part of their lives? Do you want him to be? She asked, her voice gentle. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Instead, I went to the twins, tucking their blankets tighter. Ezra mumbled something about dinosaurs. Lila sighed in her sleep. Ivy's tiny hand twitched, like she was dreaming of reaching for me. They were my world, my foundation. But Julian's face, his shock, his regret, it stirred something I'd buried long ago. Love, maybe, or the ghost of it. The next morning, another package arrived. This time, it was a set of books, architecture journals I'd been eyeing but couldn't afford. The note was the same, keep building. I ran my fingers over the covers, my heart racing. If it wasn't Julian, who was it? And why did they know so much about me? I thought of Nate, his kind eyes at the market, his number still tucked in my pocket. I hadn't called him, too scared of what it might mean. But now, with Julian back and the donations piling up, I felt like I was standing on a fault line, waiting for the ground to shift. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over his name. Maybe Mara was right. Maybe I didn't have to do this alone. But trust was a fragile thing, and I wasn't sure I had any left to give. The Charleston autumn was soft, the air carrying a hint of salt and the first crisp edge of fall. My apartment above the bakery smelled of pumpkin bread, the scent drifting up from below, mixing with the chaos of my life. Ezra's dinosaur toys scattered across the floor, Lila's glittery art projects on the table, and Ivy's babbling as she stacked blocks in her playpen. At 32, I'd learned to find beauty in the mess, but lately, the mess felt bigger than me. Julian's reappearance had cracked open a door I'd thought was bolted shut, and the anonymous donations, still arriving, still unsigned, kept me on edge. Now a new text from Julian lit up my phone. Can we talk about the twins? I want to meet them. I stared at the words, my heart a tug of war between protectiveness and fairness. Ezra and Lila were mine, my anchors, built from years of bedtime stories and scraped knees. But they were his too, even if he'd walked away 7 years ago. I hadn't answered him yet, but the question hung over me like a storm cloud. What did it mean to let him in? Could I trust him not to break their hearts, or mine again? I was still wrestling with it when Mara burst through the door, her wild curls bouncing, a coffee in each hand. You look like you're plotting a heist, she said, handing me a cup. What's going on? I showed her the text. She whistled low. Bold move, Mr. Tech Billionaire. You gonna let him see them? I don't know, I admitted, sinking onto the couch. Ivy toddled over, offering me a block with a grin. I kissed her forehead, her hazel eyes, so like Nate's it made my chest ache. They deserve to know their dad, but what if he disappears again? They're 6, Mara. They'll remember. Mara sat beside me, her voice gentle. You can't control what he does, Elena. But you can control the terms. Set boundaries. Make it about the kids, not you. I nodded, but the thought of seeing Julian again, of letting him into our world, felt like handing over a piece of my foundation. I'd spent years building something solid for Ezra, Lila, and now Ivy. Could I let someone else add to it without the whole thing crumbling? A week later, I agreed to a meeting at Waterfront Park. Neutral ground, public, safe. The twins were excited, though they didn't know the full story. I told them Julian was an old friend who wanted to meet them, not ready to drop the dad bomb. They bounded ahead, Ezra chasing a squirrel, Lila twirling under the live oaks, her purple scarf fluttering. I pushed Ivy's stroller, my stomach in knots, scanning for Julian. He was waiting by the pineapple fountain, dressed in a gray sweater and jeans, looking less like a tech mogul and more like the man I'd fallen for a decade ago. His storm-cloud eyes lit up when he saw the twins, but he stayed still, letting me approach. Hey, he said, his voice soft. Thanks for this. Don't thank me yet, I said, keeping my tone firm. This is for them, not you. Be careful with them, Julian. He nodded, his jaw tight. I will. I promise. I called the twins over, my heart pounding. Ezra, Lila, this is Julian. He's someone I used to know. He wants to hang out with you guys today. Ezra squinted at him, suspicious as always. Do you like dinosaurs? Julian smiled, crouching to his level. Love them. Triceratops is my favorite. What's yours? T-Rex, Ezra said, puffing out his chest. They're the best. Lila tugged my sleeve. Can he push me on the swings? Sure, sweetie. I set my throat tight. I watched as Julian followed them to the playground, pushing Lila's swing while Ezra climbed the slide. He was gentle, patient, laughing at Ezra's dinosaur facts and Lila's endless questions about the sky. I sat on a bench, Ivy in my lap, my eyes never leaving them. It was surreal, seeing Julian with our kids, like a piece of a life I'd imagined years ago. But it wasn't that life. This was real, messy and fragile. After an hour, the twins ran back, sweaty and grinning. He's cool, Ezra declared, grabbing my hand. Can he come over again? We'll see, I said, ruffling his curls. Julian approached, his expression soft but guarded. They're amazing, Elena, he said. You've done everything. Don't, I said, my voice sharp. Don't act like you know them. One afternoon doesn't make you their dad. He flinched but nodded. I know. I want to try. If you'll let me. I didn't answer, just packed up Ivy's stroller and called the twins. We'll talk, I said finally, but this is on my terms. Fair, he said, his eyes holding mine. I'm not going anywhere. I wanted to believe him, but I'd heard that promise before. 2 days later, I was at the grocery store, Ivy in the cart, the twins arguing over cereal, when my phone buzzed. A text from a number I hadn't saved but recognized instantly. Nate. Heard you had another kid. Congrats. Can we talk? My heart stopped. I hadn't seen Nate since the market, hadn't called him despite Mara's nudging. I'd kept Ivy's paternity a secret, but Charleston was small, and secrets didn't stay buried. Someone, a co-worker, a daycare mom, must have seen us, done the math. I typed a quick reply, my hands shaking. Sure. Coffee tomorrow. The next morning, I left the kids with Mara and met Nate at a cafe on King Street. The air smelled of espresso and fresh croissants, but my stomach was too knotted to eat. Nate was already there, his dark hair tousled, his brown eyes warm but wary. He stood when I approached, pulling out my chair. You didn't have to do that, I said, sitting. Habit, he said, smiling faintly. You look good, Elena. I laughed, nervous. I look like I haven't slept in a year. 3 kids will do that. He nodded, his gaze dropping to his coffee. I heard about your daughter. Ivy, right? She's what, 2 now? Yeah, I said, my throat tight. Here it was, the moment I'd been dreading. He leaned forward, his voice low. Elena, I'm not stupid. The timing, her eyes, she's mine, isn't she? I froze, my hands gripping my mug. I could lie, push him away, keep my world intact. But his eyes were so earnest, so hurt, that I couldn't. Yes, I whispered. She's yours. He exhaled, leaning back, his face a mix of relief and pain. Why didn't you tell me? That night. I thought we had something. We did, I said, tears stinging my eyes. But I was scared. I'd just gone through a divorce. I was raising twins, and then you. It was too much. I didn't know how to let you in. He nodded, his jaw tight. I get it. I do. But I want to know her, Elena. I want to be her dad, if you'll let me. I looked at him, his steady gaze, his hands clenched like he was bracing for rejection. He wasn't Julian, running from responsibility. But letting him in meant opening another door, risking another piece of my heart. I need time, I said. This is a lot. Take all the time you need, he said. I'm not going anywhere. Those words again. I wanted to believe them, but trust was a thread I'd lost years ago. That night, I sat on my balcony, the Charleston skyline glowing under a crescent moon. The twins were asleep, Ivy's soft snores drifting from her crib. Another package had arrived that afternoon, school supplies for Ezra and Lila with the same typed note, keep building. I held it in my hands, my mind spinning. Julian swore it wasn't him, but who else could it be? Someone who knew my kids, my work, my life. I thought of Nate, his quiet plea to be part of Ivy's world. I thought of Julian, swinging Lila at the park, his eyes full of regret. Two men, two pasts, both wanting in. And me, caught in the middle, trying to hold my family together. Mara's words echoed, you don't have to do it alone. But alone was safe. Alone was mine. I pulled out my sketchbook, drawing a house, not the townhouses for work, but a dream home, with wide windows and a wraparound porch. It was a habit, sketching what I couldn't have, but it grounded me. Ezra, Lila, and Ivy deserved a home, not just walls but love, stability, trust. Could Julian and Nate be part of that? Or were they just threads that would unravel everything? I closed the sketchbook, my heart heavy. The twins' laughter from the park, Ivy's giggle in Nate's presence. They were weaving a new tapestry, one I hadn't planned. I didn't know how to fit Julian and Nate into it, but for my kids I'd try. One step, one thread, one day at a time. The Charleston spring was in full bloom, azaleas painting the streets in pinks and purples, the air heavy with pollen and promise. My apartment above the bakery buzzed with the usual chaos. Ezra, now 6, was building a Lego dinosaur, Lila was coloring a picture of a unicorn, and Ivy, 2.5, was stacking blocks with fierce determination. I was at my laptop, finalizing blueprints for the townhouse project that had become my lifeline at the architecture firm. Life felt like a tightrope, but I was walking it, balancing motherhood, work, and the tangled threads of Julian and Nate. The anonymous donations, still arriving, still unsigned, were a nagging mystery, but I'd pushed them to the back of my mind. I had enough to handle without chasing ghosts. It was a Friday, the twins' school hosting a spring fair. I'd volunteered to help, mostly because Lila had begged to run the face-painting booth, and Ezra wanted to win a goldfish. I packed Ivy's diaper bag, grabbed a tray of cupcakes I'd baked at midnight, and herded everyone out the door. The fair was at the school's field, a sprawl of booths and laughter, kids darting between games and bounce houses. The air smelled of popcorn and sunscreen, and for a moment, I felt lighter than I had in months. Mom, can we get strawberries? Lila asked, pointing to a booth selling fruit cups, drizzled with chocolate. Her eyes, bright as the sky, sparkled with excitement. Sure, sweetie, I said, handing over a few dollars. Ezra grabbed one too, and they sat on a picnic blanket, giggling as they ate. Ivy toddled over, stealing a strawberry from Lila's cup, her little hands sticky with juice. I snapped a photo, their smiles a small victory in my chaotic world. But then Ezra coughed. A small sound at first, like he'd swallowed wrong. I glanced over, brushing it off, but his face was flushed, his eyes watering. Ezra, you okay? I asked, kneeling beside him. He nodded, but another cough came, sharper, and then Lila gasped, clutching her throat. Mom, I don't feel good, she wheezed, her voice tight. Panic clawed at me. I dropped to my knees, checking their faces. Ezra's lips were swelling, Lila's cheeks blotchy with red hives. Oh God, I whispered, my heart racing. Allergies. I scooped Ivy up, grabbing the twins' hands, and ran to the first aid tent. The volunteer, a young teacher, took one look and called 911. They're having an allergic reaction, she said, her voice calm but urgent. Do they have any known allergies? No, I said, my voice shaking. They've had strawberries before. I don't understand. The ambulance arrived in a blur of sirens, paramedics moving fast. I held Ivy tight, my eyes locked on Ezra and Lila as they were loaded onto stretchers, oxygen masks over their faces. My world narrowed to their ragged breaths, the beep of monitors, the paramedics' clipped voices. At the hospital, I sat in the ER waiting room, Ivy asleep in my arms, my phone trembling in my hand as I called Mara. They're in with the doctors, I said, my voice breaking. It's bad, Mara. I don't know what happened. I'm on my way, she said, her voice steady. You're not alone, Elena. Hang on. I nodded, though she couldn't see me, and stared at the hospital doors. The twins were my everything, the foundation I'd built my life on. If I lost them, I couldn't finish the thought. I rocked Ivy, her warmth grounding me, and prayed for the first time in years. The doctor came out an hour later, her face calm but serious. They're stable, she said, and I exhaled, tears streaming down my face. It was a severe allergic reaction, likely to strawberries. We've given them epinephrine and antihistamines. They'll need to stay overnight for observation. Can I see them? I asked, my voice raw. Of course, she said. They're asking for you. I followed her to the pediatric ward, Ivy still in my arms. Ezra and Lila were in side-by-side beds, their faces pale but their eyes bright. Mom! Lila called, reaching out. Ezra managed a weak smile, his hand clutching a stuffed dinosaur a nurse had given him. I'm here, I said, kissing their foreheads, my heart still pounding. You scared me. We're okay, Ezra said, his voice hoarse. But strawberries are mean. I laughed through tears, smoothing Lila's hair. No more strawberries, I promise. Mara arrived soon after, her arms full of snacks and a change of clothes for me. She hugged me tight, her curls tickling my cheek. They're tough, like their mom, she said. You got this. I nodded, but the fear lingered, a weight I couldn't shake. I'd failed them, hadn't I? I hadn't known about the allergy, hadn't protected them. The guilt was a knife, twisting deeper with every beep of the monitors. Then my phone buzzed. Julian. I'd forgotten I'd texted him in the ambulance, a desperate reflex. At the hospital, Ezra and Lila had an allergic reaction. They're stable, but I'm scared. His reply was instant. I'm coming. He arrived within the hour, his face drawn, his gray sweater rumpled like he'd run from a meeting. Elena, he said, his voice thick. Are they okay? Stable, I said, nodding toward their room. They're resting. He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. I got here as fast as I could. What happened? I told him about the strawberries, the swelling, the ambulance. His eyes darkened, and he sank into a chair. Strawberries, he said, almost to himself. I'm allergic to them too. It's hereditary. I should have told you. I stared at him, the words sinking in. You're allergic. Why didn't you say anything? I didn't know they'd inherit it, he said, his voice breaking. I didn't know about them, Elena. I'm so sorry. The apology hit like a wave, stirring up the pain of his absence. But seeing him here, his eyes red with worry, I couldn't hate him. Not now. They're okay, I said, my voice softer. But they need to know the stuff, Julian. They need a dad who's here. He nodded, his jaw tight. I want to be. If you'll let me. Before I could answer, another figure appeared in the doorway. Nate. His dark hair was mussed, his brown eyes wide with concern. He held a coffee and a bag of takeout, his gaze flicking between me and Julian. Elena, I heard about the twins. A friend from the firm was at the fair. Is everyone okay? I nodded, my throat tight. They're stable. Thanks for coming. He set the coffee on the table, his eyes lingering on Ivy, asleep in my arms. I brought food. Figured you hadn't eaten. The gesture was small but grounding, like Mara's hugs or the twins' laughter. I introduced him to Julian, the air thick with tension. Nate, this is Julian, the twins' father. They shook hands, sizing each other up like wary animals. Julian's eyes narrowed, Nate's jaw tightened, but they stayed civil. For me. For the kids. You can both see them, I said, leading them to the twins' room. Ezra and Lila lit up, their energy returning. Julian sat by Ezra, asking about his dinosaur, while Nate showed Lila a silly drawing he'd sketched on a napkin. Ivy stirred, reaching for Nate, and he lifted her gently, his smile soft. I watched them, my heart a tangle of fear and gratitude. These men, from different pieces of my past, were here, stepping up in their own ways. But I didn't know how to let them in without losing control. That night, Mara took Ivy home, and I stayed at the hospital, curled up in a chair between the twins' beds. Julian had left to arrange a specialist, pulling strings with his tech world connections. Nate stayed longer, bringing me a blanket and another coffee before heading out. "Call me if you need anything," he said, his hand brushing mine. I nodded, too tired to speak. Alone with the twins, I listened to their soft breathing, the monitor's steady rhythm. The crisis had shaken me, reminding me how fragile my world was. I'd built a life for us, brick by brick, but it could crumble in a moment. The allergy was a new weight, a reminder of Julian's absence, of the things I couldn't control. When Julian returned, he brought a pediatric allergist, a woman with a calm voice and a plan, tests, an EpiPen, and a diet overhaul. "We'll make sure they're safe," she said, and I believed her. Julian paid for it all, no questions asked. I wanted to argue, to keep my independence, but I was too grateful to fight. "Thank you," I said, meeting his eyes. "For this." He nodded, his gaze steady. "I owe you a lot more than this, Elena." I didn't answer, but his words stayed with me. Nate's quiet support and Julian's resources, they were threads in a tapestry I hadn't expected. But I was still the weaver, and I wasn't sure how to fit them in without losing myself. The twins were released the next morning, bouncing back with the resilience of childhood. Back home, Mara was waiting with pancakes and a fierce hug. "You're a warrior," she said, her voice thick. "But you don't have to fight alone." I nodded, watching Ezra and Lila chase Ivy around the living room, their laughter filling the space. The anonymous donations were still a mystery, another package arriving that morning. EpiPens and a child-friendly allergy book with the same note, "Keep building." But the crisis had shifted something in me. Julian's regret, Nate's steadiness, and Mara's love, they were part of my foundation now, whether I wanted them to be or not. I sat on my balcony that night, sketching a house in my notebook, a safe one, with no strawberries, no fear. The twins and Ivy were my home, but maybe, just maybe, I could let others help hold it up. I didn't trust easily, but for my kids I'd try. One step, one thread, one day at a time. Loved Elena's story of twins and second chance love? Hit like and subscribe for more heart-pounding drama. Don't forget the bell.